Hi, everyone. I'm Deborah Gardner, the host for Hospitality Today Live. Welcome. And it's another Tuesday, another great week, because we have always had some great guests here with us. And I'm so excited to introduce our guest for today, because like many of today's key aspects with meetings and events, food and beverage is having a moment of adapting as well. And as the recovery pushes forward, how is food and beverage resetting itself to operate in a post-COVID world? And I'm sure you have many other questions, like what does food and beverage look like with redesigning as well? How does it connect to DEI? And what are the best practices that you can handle for dietary restrictions? And what about sustainability? What offerings are around that when it comes to food and beverage as well? Well, I know one person that has all those answers, and she is the founder of Thrive Meeting and Events. And I'm talking about none other, my good friend and a longtime veteran, Tracy Stuckrath. And she is going to be here. And on top of that, by the way, she is a podcast host as well called Eating at Meetings, a fabulous show. So I am so thrilled that you are here with us, and I know you're going to really like today's episode. So don't go away. We'll be right back. Well, welcome, Tracy, my friend.
Hey, Deborah. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Thank you so much for joining us for this very short episode that we really want to dig deep into food and beverage and all the updates that's going on. But first, I want to say congratulations on being one of the top 20 meeting trendsetters who made a difference in 2021. This year. So congratulations.
Well, thank you so much. And congratulations right back at you.
I knew you were going to do that. And who else do we have to thank? Meetings Today, yes. Tyler Davidson for making that happen. So yeah, that was a nice surprise yesterday. Really thrilled to be on that amazing list, especially with you. So congratulations. So yeah, let's talk about food and beverage.
Yeah.
What are you seeing out there? I mean, what's the new normal? What's going on?
Well, consider I've been to probably 6 events in the last 2 months, and I have to tell you, every one of them's been different. So nothing has been consistent, which is a good thing to make our events, a little bit different from each other. But, last year when I was doing a ton of webinars on what is the new normal, how are we doing this, and talking about food safety, across the board, food safety is still a big priority for all of the places that I've been, the venues as well as the planners. But, some of the buffets, I think only one event or maybe 2 events actually had the plexiglass up in front of the buffets. Okay. Some of the events had servers serving it. Some of them had it self-serve. So it has run and then some of them had box lunches. Or not box lunches, but actually it was MPIWEC that actually had a buffet and everything was in a compostable box. And that was at Caesars Forum. And I liked that. But at that same event, there was also self-serve breakfast. So it's run the gamut across the board. And I think everybody's just still trying to figure it out. And I think it depends on how many people. I've also been to a couple of events that it was plated and served. And so the challenge on that one has been the staffing.
Yeah.
We've heard a lot about staffing and lack of at a lot of our events, and there's been quite a few places that I've noticed that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Everywhere the staffing is the hardest part, which I think is going to probably bring a lot of AI into the picture eventually, but hopefully not. We really miss our hospitality peeps, especially behind the buffet, which of course doesn't exist right now. I don't know. I mean, I'm hearing that they're even creating. We have hybrid meetings. They're thinking about creating, from what I've read, hybrid buffets, like, where they actually have the buffet line, like you said, the glass wall, but they're also serving people at the tables too. So maybe that's like a choice, I guess.
Well, and so like there's one property that I was on a episode with, and they did not invest in the plexiglass because their properties, they're so large that the investment was going to be humongous, right? And they did not think that investment was a good one for the long term because, are we going to use plexiglass for forever, right? And which is kind of weird if you think about it, because when you go to a buffet at an Asian restaurant or something like that, right? They have the sneeze guards, but catering buffets never really had those. So some properties may not be investing in that, the plexiglass. And so I could see it being both ways. And there's a comment in here from Joan. And Joan, I do want to say that food safety has always been there as we look at it from, making sure that we don't get listeria or salmonella and anything like that. So the food safety practices that our catering partners have had, those are still in place. They never went away, and they actually had to have those in place beforehand. COVID is not transmitted through food and beverage, just to remind everyone. You cannot get it through food and beverage. It is not a foodborne illness, foodborne disease. And when the CDC first came out, touching surfaces and things like that, the CDC does say that it's highly unlikely that you're going to get it from touching surfaces and tongs, or serving spoons and things like that. But the food service practitioners have actually been really good at making sure that those are changed out regularly, or that they are serving, individuals the food and beverage instead, or putting it in boxes. So I think the other challenge, again, is going back to that service standard and the number of servers, is the staffing. And how do you bring those individuals in when they've been furloughed and they come in for just 3 days for your meeting, and then they're furloughed again, right? So that's a big balancing act across the board.
Yeah, that's a great comment, Joan Eisenstadt, one of our icons in the industry. Adore her, and she's got other comments coming through. I'm just loving this. I want to try to get all of these in here. And you're right; it all has to do with the staffing. Now, are they requiring vaccinations for these type of staffings? I mean, how do you make a safe environment when it's really uncomfortable? Really?
Well, I don't know that, but I know that in the locations that I've been, that masking has definitely been a mandate for all the food and beverage servers, front of house and the back of the house. I don't know about the vaccinations. I know United just announced that they are going to require all of their employees to be vaccinated, and that's an airline. I have not heard that from the hotel side, unless it popped in the last couple of days. And so I think it's going to be something that they may be looking at. But then again, you also have to look at the unions. Is the union going to require it, depending on what city you're in and how that works? So that may be a discussion point for unions and the properties that are utilizing those servers.
Yeah. And Joan Eisenstadt made another good point, that MGM so far, as far as hotel wise, vaccinated. As a matter of fact, MGM just got bought out, I guess, by Vicky. So maybe that's because of that buyout that happened. But Joan's right, that so far we don't have very many hotels that are putting all that into place.
Well, and the challenge that comes with that too is that, so MGM owns all of its properties, right? But you have a Marriott or Hyatt or whatever, they're they're owned by somebody else and they're managed by another company. So maybe even though they carry that, the management company or the ownership company may not mandate that. And I don't think Hyatt can mandate that of its franchise owners. And I'm just using Hyatt as an example. So, but anybody that's got that franchise, I'm not sure how that's going to work.
Yeah. Very, very good point. Very good point. Well, I love your quote that you have said somewhere before, and I don't know where I got it from, but you always talk about every guest matters, every meal matters.
Mm-hmm.
And so what dietary needs do you see most often on like event registration? Are you seeing people really caring about, I think, vegan, gluten-free, vegetarian? Are you seeing more of that?
Well, so the research that I've seen since COVID came out, that 70%, and this is from IFIC, International IFIC, and they asked their study, how many of you are avoiding avoiding ingredients in food and beverage? And over 70% of people said they were avoiding food and beverage, specific types of food and beverage for one reason or another. 45% of that was because they were looking at the health benefits of the food and beverage, so they were avoiding sugar or salt or something like that, right? Then it was food allergies, and then it was something else, and then it was personal preference and religious-based practices. And so that made up 70% of the people. So we're seeing all those different dietary restrictions, and that's actually because of, as a result of COVID. We've been home. Some people are taking advantage of just being home and, eating on the couch, and other people are, super fit, but a lot of them have reconnected with or connected for the first time with local farmers because they didn't want to go to the grocery store. So they were ordering direct from their farmers with CSA boxes. So they're looking and paying attention to what's in their food and looking at organic and looking at fresher options for their meals. So they're going to look for that when they're going to meetings and events as well.
That's good. That's good. And then Joan, we're so glad, Joan, we should have had you on the show with us here. She has a good point as well. What about avoiding? What should they be avoiding?
Tracy, you asked in a survey, and I see too few groups who ask for ADNAs, which includes food and beverage. Right. So how do they even know what to avoid? Very good question, Joan. Yep. Yes, 100%. Meeting planners, event planners need to be asking about dietary needs when they do the event registration forms. And I suggest putting it under I suggest putting food and beverage in two different places, and one under the ADA question. So do you have any accessibility needs that we need to take into consideration while you're participating in our event? And that would include mobility and hearing and vision, but food and beverage. And the reason I ask that, or I suggest that, is because in 2008, the Americans with Disabilities Act was amended. And with that amendment came new terms to the list of major life activities, which is eating, as well as all of our bodily functions, cardiovascular system, immune system, digestive tract, which then now means that anybody who has celiac disease, diabetes, food allergies, now has civil rights protections under the ADA. Sure. And that was a huge mouthful. So asking the question, do you have any food allergies? Do you have any food dietary needs that we need to consider? And then when you ask that, do those medically necessary ones, and then ask, do you have any other dietary preferences, which would be the religious and the vegan and the vegetarian, no pork, no beef, no dairy, things like that, or gluten-free as well, so that you can actually maybe delineate a little bit, which one's medically necessary and which one is not. Although I would consider the religious-based ones at the same level as the medically necessary because they are religious-based practices.
Gosh, I remember the days where this just was not even part of the planning process at all.
Oh, I know. Just checking for
it's right? Detailed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing how everybody's really paying attention to that. And I think that's a key to this whole COVID era that we've been going through. We haven't been really paying attention to the health aspects, our immune system. And you, especially on your podcast, bring this to the surface for us. and knowing that those are even options when an attendee sees something like this on their registration form, they're going to go, wow, this company organization really cares about my health. So I think the more detailed, the better, so that you can cover all bases.
Well, and I agree. It does get challenging though, because I did an event in January of 2020, so just before the lockdown, and we had 600 attendees and 200 of them had dietary needs.
Wow.
And 100 of those were vegan, vegetarian, which I would 100% serve everybody vegan. And then after that, and there was a few, like they were vegan and they were also gluten-free or vegan in this. And then the rest of them, the other 100 were religious or other food allergies, etc. And so it does get challenging, but my suggestion is to definitely look at that list. And if somebody tells you they're allergic to pineapple or they're allergic to eggplant or something, right? You can easily eliminate that completely from the menu, right? And so that person doesn't have to be provided a personalized plate, for that meal or for any of the meals, right?
Yeah,
you can go through that. And like years ago, we had somebody with an apple allergy at SpinCon, and we eliminated apple completely from the menu.
Wow.
For 3.5 days. And so that's another way to make sure that you're providing an inclusive experience without adding another level of planning that you have to take into consideration.
Right. Well, we've got Randall here that is always watching our show. We always love having Randall here. Remember when Mom put it on your plate and you just ate it?
Yes.
Well,
unfortunately, when they did that, sometimes Randall, their kid, went into anaphylactic shock. But yes, definitely. Allergies have grown. There are more and more people with allergies. There's now 32 million Americans with food allergies.
Wow, it's amazing.
Yeah,
it's all coming to the surface. And what better way to impress, somebody to go to your conference or meeting, whatever, than to make sure that you cover all those bases, like mentioned. Now, Tracy, what pandemic-related trends do you think will actually stick or won't stick? Sitting at a banquet table of 6 to 8 people, or is that going to change? Are we going to go back to the old way of 6 to 8 people at 72-inch round, or are there going to be different things going to be popping up?
Well, I think 72-inch round actually used to be 10 people. And I think Michael Dominguez, who mentioned that at one of their events, they did 6 people at a table. And I love this story, that one of the sponsors was like, no, I want my 10 people at the table. And the planner was like, no, we need to accommodate, the safety, additional spacing on those tables. And after the event, the sponsor was like, wow, I really got to connect with those 5 other people at the table. And it actually enhanced his experience as a sponsor. So I'm hoping that actually sticks with us. So doing smaller tables with fewer people at it, so that people can actually connect. And a couple of events that I've seen is that people are standing in the hallways connecting with each other then instead of going into the education. So looking at that, how can you enhance that food and beverage experience? And I think smaller tables is the opportunity. In some of the seating that I've seen there, and actually this was a corporate client I went up to speak for in Boston, and they had little vignettes of 3 small cocktail rounds put together. And so the distancing was there, but they could have those 3 people at a table together. Or you could do just smaller, use 60-inch rounds or the 72-inch rounds and do fewer people at that. So I hope that sticks. When we're looking at other trends in that presentation style, going back through the buffet, how can we enhance the experience with it instead of just being self-serve down there? Can we add some more action stations to that? But again, as I said at the very beginning, that comes into staffing wise. What can we do? We also need to take into consideration, and I think that the physical distancing of tables and chairs, and Joan, I hope you like this comment as well, is that actually gives a lot more space for accessing the dining area. So a lot more movability for everyone to get through. And I love that. Last week, I was at the National Association of Catering and Events convention, and they had all these different vignettes of different types of tables and seating. And we need to make sure that when we're doing that, there's easy access for everyone to get through those spaces, whether it's rounds or different couches and chairs and high tables. And by the way, if you have a lot of high boy tables, make sure, don't quote me on the number, but I think it's for every 5 to 10 tables, high boy tables, you need to actually have a smaller cocktail table. And that's for a standard restaurant. So think about that in your catering events as well. So I want that to stick with us as well, or actually to be emphasized and put into that planning process.
Nice. Well, what about on the beverage side? Is there anything that we need to know as far as, alcohol?
Oh my gosh, cut it out.
I know, right?
Yeah.
I don't want that cut out.
No, we don't have to cut it out completely, but studies have shown that 30% of individuals who are of drinking age don't even drink alcohol. So make sure that you've got options. There's a lot of really cool and tasty seltzers out there. You've got gluten-free beer. You've got, which is not alcohol-free, but, do zero-proof mocktails. And utilizing nice fresh herbs from the local farmer, and actually in Atlanta, there's a bartender there that actually started a garden specifically for bartenders to grow herbs and spices to use in drinks.
Nice.
So think about how to do that, but with zero proof, no alcohol in it. So not a Shirley Temple, but upgrade it some. And
I don't know. I kind of like Shirley Temples.
Oh, I did. I used to drink those all the time.
I know, me too.
Yes. And
so what does the the question of what, where, and how do you see events going, in the next 10 to 15 years, like way far out? What do you see prediction wise in that arena?
So a couple of weeks ago, I was up at the IAC conference, and they did 3 different pods. And one of our assignments in the 3 different pods was to what does events look like in 5, 10, 20 years? And a couple of people focused on food and beverage. And I thought a couple of these were pretty cool, and also like, oh, wow. One is for the personalized plates is to actually use 3D printing for those, which I still can't grasp what 3D printing of food or even a bolt means, but Grey's Anatomy did it, right? They 3D deliver. But so 3D printing it. Other people had actually suggested that on your phone, because a lot of people are getting their DNA testing and seeing what foods are right for their body, that you actually upload that to the app. And so they're going to custom design food and beverage specific to attendees, which would be kind of hard, I think, for a humongous conference, but it could be nice and something very personalized for an incentive trip or, a smaller CEO level meeting. So, but I think that, I said it a couple of weeks ago, we kind of really need to flip that 72-inch round over or spin it around, whatever you want to do, and rethink how we make food and beverage a personalized experience. It is our common ground. It is our universal experience, but people eat different ways for a variety of different reasons. And we can't shame them for that. We need to accept it. And we need to learn how to personalize it.
Yeah, I totally agree. And Joan has a great comment here too. Prediction wise, will there be food, given, brought, environment, lack of water, all of that. Ooh, Yeah.
He's got a really good point. I mean, the UN just came out with a new study. This is, we as humans need to be looking at what we're doing for sustainability, for our food and beverage and just our overall survival.
Right.
And so looking at local farmers, what can we do? And as, the Northwest gets super hot, and, where I'm in North Carolina, we've had like 7 days of rain. I'm like, Mother Nature, can you just move that to California, please? Right? They really need it. But how is that going to actually affect the growing seasons and the growing patterns of our farmers and what is local and what is in season for you. Even my farmers here in Carteret County, North Carolina, that are doing greenhouse growing and not out in pasture, they've had some struggles too. So even with the temperatures and things like that. So we do really need to pay attention to where we're sourcing it and who we're sourcing it from. And talking about sourcing too, is that a lot of the transportation companies, Cisco or food companies that our food and beverage partners order from, they're missing drivers right now. So
sure.
And so when we're thinking about our menus, sometimes we think about them at the very last minute. Some properties are actually having to place their orders 30 days in advance because they're only getting a delivery once a week versus a couple times a week. So that's something else that we need to take into consideration.
Yeah, and sustainability overall is going to be key throughout this whole discovery of what we're going to do in the future, because everybody's going to be looking at that and making sure that, food is not wasted. It's presented, in a nice package where, again, it's safe and, looking delicious and all that good stuff. But I think you're right. I believe you're right. You're definitely going to see some changes in the future, and which is really exciting. Because I think we're heading in the right direction of all things that are going on in our industry right now. Food and beverage is finally getting the attention of saying, hey, it's time for us to be healthy. It's time to meet the needs of those that are attending our conference in order to make everything successful. And it's all around food and beverage. So how can planners work better with their venues? To just make it the best experience, the safest environment when it comes to planning food and beverage?
Well, a couple of things that they need to do. First of all, is they need to address food and beverage at the very beginning, at the RFP stage, when they're sourcing their venues. And that means they need to know their food and beverage history. So how many people did you have? And kind of going into, coming out of COVID, those numbers might be a little bit different. But look at your trends over 5 years, if you can. How many people attended those specific events that are in your food and beverage functions within your events, and track that percentage wise, because you don't need to be ordering, food for 50% of the people when only 30% of the people attend that reception. And going forward, you definitely need to be asking them, which food and beverage functions will you be attending at the event upcoming? Because there's no need to order food for me if I'm going to miss, if my flight gets in and misses the reception, or I have to leave early because I have to go, cover for my nieces and nephew, right? So understanding when arrival and departure schedules is really important, but also asking about the dietary needs up front and giving that information to your catering partners well in advance and including on that RFP. You need to know, hey, the last 4 events, we had 20% gluten-free and we had 30% vegan. Chef, can you do that? So that should actually be a stipulation in your RFP for them to respond to when you're coming back, because you don't want to take the time to contract with a venue that chef doesn't have any idea how to make vegan food, right? Or gluten-free food. So, and working with them up front and having that conversation. So that that you've got a partner in that, and also talking to them about, what's local, what's seasonal, how can you incorporate some of that, and also about the spacing of their food and beverage functions and how it's going to be set up.
Wow. That's a whole nother hat that, planners have to wear more now than ever. And I can't even imagine, I know that you mentioned before, I don't know where I read it, but food and beverage is connected to DEI.
Yes.
And how is that, take place, and what are the best practices around that?
So DEI, for those who don't know what that means, is diversity, equity, and inclusion. Right. And how it plays out is asking those questions. Do you have any dietary restrictions? Because Deborah, when I sit down at a table with you and you're vegan and I'm gluten-free, and we've got Randall and Joan sitting at a table, and you and I don't have our food yet, we don't feel included in that conversation. And then actually, if Joan, because Joan utilizes a scooter to get around events, if she can't actually wheel her scooter up to a table, that's where that inclusion, exclusion, and equity experience happens. So even at an event I attended recently, the breaks, everything contained gluten. I'm like, you had 2 items and both of them contained gluten. Why can't you make one of them gluten-free? Right. So, and the bars for the self-serve beverages were, I think the countertops were up here. So that's not accessible. So we really need to think about how it's the access to the food and beverage function. How do we get to it and how do we reach for it? But it's also what's being served on the plate. Because if you busted your butt to sell your company's product, your widgets, right? And you get invited to this incentive trip to Ireland and you've communicated, they haven't asked you about your dietary needs, and every meal you sit down at, your thought process is like, I busted my butt for them and this is what they think of me.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I totally agree with you. And also I can't imagine what the kitchen looks like now, what the chef has to go through. So I think they need to be involved in these conversations as well. Right. Yeah. Because it's like, oh my gosh, there's just so much to engulf in this, because it's very important to everybody. And it gets to the point too, if they have an experience like what you just mentioned, they're not going to go back.
Right.
Right.
And and if we even talk about our industry events, right? I mean, you've got a group of people in here that are responsible for ordering meetings. Right. And if you don't get that right, what is that impression of that meeting planner who has dollars? But even if it's the widget convention, right? You don't know who's in that room that could potentially be coming back to stay in your property. But kind of that comment, though, also was on the flip side. That's showing that the venue was bad, right? "Quote unquote" bad. But it also starts with that planning process. So everybody has the responsibility to make sure that the needs are met, including the person who has the need, but all the way through the servers and the banquet captains and the bartenders. And so it's really, really important that we all communicate. And one thing that I want to point out, Deborah, is that food and beverage has usually, and most likely, is the top expense on any event budget. Right. And it is the thing that we spend probably the least amount of time on. And when 40% of food is wasted every year, according to the UN, what would you do with that 40% of money? Can you reuse it somewhere else? Or why not make sure that you're spending it the right way so that we all get meals that meet our needs? Because I'm going to be really annoyed that I ordered a filet mignon for you, and you don't eat it because that cost me $150, right? Including plus, right? Yeah.
Totally agree. Well, this episode went really fast.
It did.
I'm like, wow, I mean, we can go on for another hour because there's so much information to cover. But like, I agree with Tyler Davidson, who we were talking about earlier. Thanks for all you do. Because it's so nice to see somebody take the reins when it comes to food and beverage, and you are the go-to girl when it comes to that. So I know a lot of people want to, follow up and talk to you, and I know you do a lot of speaking on this as well. So what better way than to hear it straight from the expert like yourself? And I know since people want to get in touch with you, how is that possible? Well, we've got your email and your website. Any other way that you'd like to be contacted?
Yeah, you can find, I have the Eating at a Meeting, if you can read Eating at a Meeting podcast. So you can listen to me. I do episodes just like Deborah does every single week live, but you can download them onto all podcast platforms. There's also the Eating at a Meeting Facebook group, which I just reached 1,000 members. So I'm so excited. And so that's a way to stay connected and learn more about it as we go through. I'm sharing my experiences, and I want all of the community members within that group to share their experiences at events now, because we can only learn from each other. But and then on Instagram, I'm T Stuckrath. So my first initial last name.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Well, thank you so much, my friend, for
Thank
being
you.
here, because this was one episode I was really looking forward to. Very important, and I know everybody can hear see the replays if they missed it as well, or we can get
Yep.
it out there as well. So thank you so much for sharing all this information, and we'll see you at a live event real soon.
Thanks, Deborah.
Whoops. There you go. We got Tracy. We don't want to let go of her. I'll tell you that much. But she definitely knows her stuff, right? So definitely keep in touch with her. Contact her in any way possible, because I tell you what, she has the answers. And if she doesn't, she'll find out, because it's changing every day. Our entire meetings and events industry is changing every day. So we have to stay on top of it. And what better person than Tracy to do that with food and beverage? So I hope you enjoyed this episode. And if so, please share the conversation with others, and or also look at the replay on any of our social media platforms. And if you have any questions or want to talk about the show or be on the show, by all means, contact us at hello@Hospitality Today Live. We'd love to hear from you. So now you're probably wondering, what is next? Next Tuesday, again, same time, we will be here with Amanda Wells. Now, Amanda Wells is the Director of National Accounts for the Arlington CVB, which is Convention and Visitors Bureau. She's a huge advocate and a longtime industry leader for about 25 plus years. And of course, she serves on many industry organization boards and committees as well. But the thing about Amanda is she has been going through something different here during the pandemic. And she's very driven by helping others find their passions and strengths. She wants you to think big and really go for it. How? Well, she has one word for you, and that word will be definitely revealed next Tuesday with Amanda Wells. So we hope you'll join us. And of course, I'm Deborah Gardner, the host of Hospitality Today Live. Thank you for joining us. And remember, if you're thinking about it, we're talking about it right here on HTL. Bye, everyone. Have a nice day.